Okay, so before I introduce you to what you're actually going to be doing this week on Google Classroom, I thought I'd give you a little history lesson on Langston Hughes and the Harlem Renaissance. This is the birth of jazz music, African Americans in New York City really starting to express themselves culturally. This is also the culture of Prohibition. So you're going to see a lot of speakeasies, you're going to see a lot of people out, nightclubs. This is where African Americans really were able to be themselves, and it really was just in a pocket of Harlem before it spread around the rest of the country. As you can see, girls with flappers start to change their styles because now girls have the right to vote, they have more freedoms, and they're joining with the African Americans to kind of push for this new society. Alright, so who was Langston Hughes? Langston Hughes was a poet. He was a master of the English language, and here's an example of a poem. I've known rivers ancient as the world, and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. My soul has grown deep, like the rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo, and it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans, and I've seen its muddy bosom turn all golden in the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient dusty rivers. My soul has grown deep, like the rivers. Okay, so what do you actually need to do this week on Google Classroom? Well, it's a little bit different than normally, okay? Because this is individuals and societies and not English class. But in this situation, Langston Hughes was a poet, and he was a master at using the English language to get across the African American situation in the United States during the 1920s, especially in Harlem and all the changes that were going on. So we're going to be reading poetry this week on Google Classroom. I picked 4 poems from Langston Hughes that I want you to read. On top of that, I took an excerpt from Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. And you're going to have to choose one of the Langston Hughes' poems that you find most interesting and vivid to you. And remember, everybody reads the same poem differently. So what one student might find their favorite poem might be different for another student, or 2 students might find the same poem that they love, but they love it for different reasons. So I am going to supply you on Google Classroom the 4 poems. You're going to have to read them. Then you're going to have to choose one of the poems and write about why you chose that poem, why that poem is your favorite, and what about the way Langston Hughes uses the English language that makes you love that poem. And then you're going to read the excerpt from Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. And I want you to make a comparison to the way Martin Luther King Jr. paints the dream of an African American in the United States during the 1960s. And I want you to compare that to the way Langston Hughes kind of makes the African American dream in the 1920s. You're going to compare and contrast. Again, if you have any questions, see me during the class. I'll be here all week. This one, though, you're going to be writing it on paper. So I'm going to hand you a handout on Monday that's going to go over everything. If you're absent, please make sure you get a handout from me. I have a copy on Google Classroom that you can print out if you want, but you're going to have to be handing it in, okay? And then I will mark that you completed the assignment once you've handed it in on Friday. All right? Here we go.